Hello,
Hello.
how are you?
Wonderful. How are you?
Good. How
Hey,
did your video CC1 meetings go with Mark?
they went really well. It was kind of like old times when I was interning with him.
Yeah,
So I thought we were a good team.
well,
And I
good.
think you gave him another guy, and we're going to meet with him
Yep,
at some
yep,
point.
yep.
So,
Yeah, I found another one that somehow had slipped through the cracks, so that'll be good. But so you got a pretty good notion, I'm sure, of what you do with these people, and the
yeah,
questions that principals might have, and the clinical handbook. You know, the big thing
yeah,
is to assure the principal that you're not going to wear them out with paperwork and having to go into task stream. We do all
right.
that now, that they used to have to do. When 10 years ago, when we started the new iteration, the principal had to go in and assess the student. They had to assess their competency. They had to assess their licensure, in terms of the artifacts. Um, they had to do all those things, and so they had to have an account. And of course, they vehemently objected to that.
And I can understand that. And I
Yeah,
remember that. I remember hearing some people talking about having to do that.
yeah, it was quite an ordeal. And so we have taken all of that and moved it over to our side for us to do now. And so the principals, really all they have to do is provide opportunities and sign off on that log,
Yeah,
which is
that's not
that
bad.
has gotten a lot more of them on board. Um,
Well, both of the people we met with just happened to, they're going to have site supervisor changes by the summertime. One
yeah,
one girl is her husband's in the military and she's moving to Colorado. And then the other guy, his school is merging with another school, and they don't know exactly what that's going to
yeah,
look like, but he said his site supervisor would probably change. So
yeah,
Mark, he would be touching base with them again. But yeah, I feel like sitting with him in that, and I know he's got kind of a script there to follow. I mean, I feel like I
yeah,
can follow that. That's not too bad.
yeah. I provide them with the script and all the materials and information so that we're kind of consistent. Now, two things about the one, especially the one that's moving to Colorado. Um, that one that's mountain time. That's going to be a little bit challenging. They're 2 hours. They're 2 hours behind us.
Well, her
And
site supervisor's
her site
she'll
supervisor.
her site supervisor's moving, so
So that,
she'll
well,
get a
that's
new
good.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so good. Not that becomes an ordeal. Um, you
And her
know,
site supervisor went through Gardner Webb a few years ago.
yeah.
And that's how she
That's
recommended Gardner Webb
well, of
to
course,
this girl.
that's why I said the answer to the question is 65. How many students would you get if your recruiting service didn't do anything for a year? And the answer is 65. Because every student we've got is a legacy, or we've got a principal there, or we didn't get any from the recruiting service. Doesn't look like. It was word of mouth and legacies, and so I've gone through and mapped every one of the 65 that we got. So
Well, I would think that if that was the return you got for your investment, that you would want to put your investment in another area, or not another area, but with another company.
well, the way that it works is, you know, you can look at any actuarial table. After 7 years, you're going to get a natural decline. So about 3 years ago, they understood that they weren't going to get the kind of return on investment that they've been getting, and so they pulled back their visits and their meetings and um, uh, those things. And so they're just not recruiting. And you know, it's not just COVID; they'd already stopped. But I think they're going to sign a new 2-year contract with them. So it's not good. They're not putting much or any effort into it because they're based in Chicago. They have to fly and stay in hotels and stuff. They're not going to do that. So and so
Did you see I just sent you a message?
yeah, remind them
Okay.
that y'all are now linked to them. Just request.
Well, not everybody did what you asked last week, so just one
Yeah.
more reminder.
Yeah, we'll do that. Let me write that on my notepad over here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, but what I will show you, and I know that you won't remember this, but just so you'll know, request comments. Okay. So let me share my screen real quick. For those who change site supervisors when they let you know, let's see what this chat is. Okay. I've got it set up now. Let me go back here. It's kicked me out. It does about every 5 minutes now from usage. So if I can get signed back in. So what I've done is work with the tech people. And over here, when you sign into Web Connect, under maintain information, this folder here, and students, obviously, when they sign in, they can get to this. It's on the same list of things where their Blackboard tab and their email tab is. Under maintain information, if they'll click on that tab down here next to the bottom, update site supervisor, and that automatically links to us, and we get that information. But the best thing is it also filters into the graduate school, so their information is updated over there as well. And so that's a neat little feature that we've done.
Dr. Lamb?
Yes.
I have actually tried that 3 times, and mine still has not updated from last semester.
It may take it a little while, but if you do it once, it's in there.
So I just clicked back on the site supervisor, and it's telling me it's the previous person. And again, I've done that process 3 times, but it's still.
All right, where are you now?
So I am. So I go to maintain information, and
but physically, what school are you at now?
Oh, the Summit Virtual Academy in Rowan Salisbury Schools.
Summit Virtual Academy. All right. Let me see. It's still showing you at West Rowan Middle School.
I haven't been there since the beginning of last semester.
All right. And so shoot me an email and let me follow up on that to make sure that they're not just ignoring that information.
Okay. Thank you.
So, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to Mels 603. This is our 3rd week. Let's look at our weekly schedule. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Welcome to everybody that's with us tonight. Share screen. Thanks to Dr. Maraglia and Dr. Caton, who are with us tonight as well. I'll be calling on them later. So we'll look at our Close that. Our weekly schedule, we're in week 3. You should be on discussion board 2. I want to thank all of you. We had 100% completion of our first discussion board task. I appreciate that. And so we've moved on to 2. And as I said, I want to call on our 2 sitting principals tonight to talk for a minute. And I'll stop my share. So you were to examine a school or field trip policy, assuming that you're a supervisor, but a car rear ends the bus, what do you do? And of course, my response back on the takeaway is make sure you call 911. You're not a doctor. You can offer aid to people, but make sure that you understand that you got to. This is not one of those situations. Well, we don't want we don't want the bad PR. No, this is call 911, even if you think it's minor. Get people out there, because you never know who's hurt. But I think everybody knows to do that. But the bigger issue that comes back to bite you is when media shows up on the site and school employees speak to the media without going through the public information office, and they say nobody was hurt, and then somebody's hurt, and then that becomes an ordeal in itself. Or parents show up and they want to know what's going on. All districts, large and small, have a policy. Now, our 2 sitting principals tonight are both in larger districts, but even smaller districts have a public information officer. And so it's very important that you understand that you're not, until you've been approved to speak to the media. I don't care that you were on the bus. I don't care that you were in charge. You need to understand that you're not to speak to the media without approval. So I'm going to, again, I always catch people cold like this, but I'll call on our principals, and I'll do it in alphabetical order. I'll stop my share. Dr. Caton, can you speak to the media policy in Pitt County?
So the media policy at Pitt County is don't talk to media.
That's exactly right.
Right. You contact the PIO. And
Yeah,
if you see the media on, media is not allowed on school campuses unless they have arranged it with the public informant officer, and then they, can come on campus. You might see them across the street or something like that if something big has happened. But the policy is don't talk to them. That's the policy.
Exactly. It's a non-negotiable. And it's one of those things that one of the people that I used to work with a long time ago, Dr. Jim Pewsley, he always used to say, don't give them the stick to beat you with. They may want you for something else that they can't get you for, but now if you hand them the stick, they're going to beat you with it. And one of the things that will get you in hot water the quickest as a school administrator is speaking off the cuff to media. I don't care if you said something good or positive, or it doesn't matter. The policy is don't speak to media, period. That may be good or bad. And we won't talk about the First Amendment and all that. Free speech doesn't mean it's free. There's always repercussions. You can say what you want to, but then you have to suffer the consequences. And so in situations like that are heightened and there's safety involved, many times we forget the rules. Now, the reporters know the rules, but that doesn't keep them from sticking a microphone in your face or running on campus. Sometimes you have to tell them to leave, but if you're out on the public street, they think they have the right to stick the microphone in your face, and they do. But you have the right to say no comment and speak to the public information office. So the rules extend no matter where you are. You're always a representative of the district. Dr. Maraglia, you can speak to Charlotte Mecklenburg's policy.
It's very much the same. The only time they will allow you to speak with media is if they either give you what they want you to say, or they will sometimes give you approval to speak to someone, but it's usually going to be a very innocuous kind of situation, not an emergency or crisis situation. But the best policy is absolutely always do not respond to the media.
Yeah, absolutely. So there, you've heard it, folks. That's the reality. And even in small districts where they just have the free paper they throw out in your yard like trash. And it's about, it's about the value of it. Even in those districts, do not speak to the media. I don't care if it's something positive. Do not speak to the media. And as Dr. Maraglia said, in a lot of districts, if you do speak to the media, they've written a script for you to follow, and they assume that you can read and follow that script. Do not go off script ever. Never go off script. If you've been approved, never go off script. Now, what the media will do, and they were famous for in Charlotte Mecklenburg, is to be on your campus for one thing, and you had a script, but then they would ask you, try to catch you out and ask you a question, kind of get you relaxed and following your script, and then they'd ask you something to try to get you to, reveal some secret or make an off-the-cuff comment, and that would be the lead on the next news cycle. You don't ever want to be on the news cycle. As we used to say in CMS all the time is if you're on the news cycle more than 3 times, somebody's got to go home. There must be blood. We got to get off the news cycle. And I can tell you, I'm not a good person. You already figured that out. And I can't tell you the number of times that I was in the central office that I was hoping, almost praying for a car wreck or a shooting on the west side to get us off the news. Otherwise, I was going to have to send somebody home. It would be that bad. If you're on the noon news and you're on the 6 and the 11, if you come back on the noon news the next day, you're in trouble. And you don't want to be on that news cycle. You want to stay off the news cycle. And if you say something off the cuff or kind of extemporaneously, that's the kind of things that just keep coming back up to the point where we'll do most anything as a district to get off that news cycle. Do not contribute to that news cycle. That's the important thing. And so when you see my response to your discussion board too, yes, I want you to call 911 and offer aid and assistance the best way you can. But more importantly, any normal person with a conscience would do that. But more importantly, I want you to know, the news media is going to be there. PDQ, do not speak to the news media. That's the thing to take away from any kind of a situation like that, an emergency situation. Do not speak to them. All right. So that covers this week's discussion board. I want to speak to, I don't see her on tonight, but I want to call out Tamara Ruddick Campbell. She turned in her task 1 this week. It was the best one I've ever read. It was absolutely great. I'll get to Brad in just a minute. He's the shining star as well. But Tamara's was the best I've ever seen. And what made it the best one I ever saw is she did a correlation. She drew a connection that I hope that you can see. I think Tamara is with us now. I see her name.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. That's so sweet. A lot of work went into it.
I can tell. It was great. Absolutely great. But what was the next level thinking that just warmed my heart when I read it was, and I'm going to call on our 2 principals again here.
Thank you.
Tamara drew a parallel between at her school, and I don't mean to call her school out, that teachers don't feel they don't get a lot of input on the master schedule or the school improvement plan or the budget. So guess what happens at teacher working condition survey time? They get killed. And they wonder why. The teachers don't feel like they have a voice. They don't have input. They're not asked. They're not looked at as professionals. Well, that's why. And that's one of the things that you've got to understand as a principal. You're supposed to develop your budget, your master schedule, and your school improvement plan through a process that gathers all this data and information, and staff has input. And we take other inputs in all of these things. And if you don't do that, when TWC comes around, or if you're in South Carolina, Advanced Ed or Cognia comes around, that survey comes around, then you're sitting there scratching your head or other parts of your anatomy trying to figure out why I got killed on my TWC scores. Well, there's a reason why. You're supposed to involve all of these people. There's a process to building all of these things, and they're all linked together. And so my question to the 2 sitting principals tonight is how much does that TWC matter in the district where you work, that teacher working condition survey? As a principal, how much feedback how much does it matter in your district? And I'll go in reverse order this time. Dr. Maraglia, how much does TWC matter in Charlotte?
I'm gonna be honest with you, the insight survey seems to carry a lot more weight, because that's something that is typically given twice a year in our schools. The TWC will show up on your evaluation, but they spend a lot more time going over the insight survey and reviewing that data.
But that data is much the same in terms of
Yes, it
specific.
is. And if you're not giving teachers input, they will let you know that on the insight survey.
Yeah.
You remember that old survey we used to have that
Yes.
Dr. Freeze did?
Yes.
Now that they would kill you with.
They would kill you with it.
They would. I feel like they don't lean on it quite as heavily as they used to in those days, but you'll still see it pop up on your evaluation. Especially if there's something that's not going well.
Not going well.
Yes. They won't say so much if you had good results.
Right.
But they'll get you if
They'll
there's a
ding you
concern.
if your results are bad.
Right.
And you say, all right, Dale, tell me what bad results are. Anything that's below 85% is not good. Anything below 50%.
And if there's a discrepancy of more than 10 points between you and the district results.
Exactly.
Yes.
They'll light you up at evaluation time. And
right.
You won't survive it more than 2 years in a row. I don't care what else, what other data is good, whether it's insight. Well, insight is a subset of TWC. But if you get killed on teachers don't have a voice, you're not following the process of how these things are done that are legally mandated. In Charlotte Mecklenburg, they will let you won't last. It's just that simple. You just won't last. That survey means a lot. And Tamara rightly pulled together and made the correlation or the connection between you can't get good scores. You can't get teachers to say, yeah, I feel professional and valued and I have a voice and all that. If they don't, they'll tell it, and you will get killed in that part of your evaluation. Now, varying districts, it matters some little lot. I would say from my experience, and again, it's been a while since I've been a principal, my experience in the 3 districts that I worked in, those kind of surveys could count as much as half of your evaluation, especially if they were bad. They could count up to that much. Now, Anna's right. There was a time in Charlotte where it counted more than half, but I think they've kind of reined that back. During that time, the survey was really all that mattered. And so I would say somewhere between 20 and 50% in most of the districts that I'm aware of now on that survey. And the way that you get that survey data for it to be good is you do the things that you're supposed to do. You follow the protocols and the rationale and all these things that you create as a school, your school improvement plan, your master schedule, your budget, all of those kinds of things. There's a process for how they're developed. And if you don't follow that process, you will get called out. Dr. Caton, in Pitt County?
In Pitt County, it's looked at very heavily. We, of course, teacher working condition surveys every other year. So the years that we don't have, which is this year, the district does a climate survey, which is the exact questions of the teacher working condition survey. I encourage if anybody would like to go and look at my teacher working condition survey. I'm at Grifton High School. Feel free to do so. But if I can just tell you some of the things that I've done in the past, when I was an elementary principal, when I built classes, I actually would get the first grade teachers to help me build my second grade. And then what I would do is I would actually Xerox the pictures of all my students, cut them out, make the classes like that so I could see them, as well as, just their names. I'd give them to the teachers and say, look at these. Am I missing anything? How does this look? So that's what I would do as an elementary principal. In high school, same thing. I use a lot of EVOS with all my making my data or making my classes and things like that. And I will say for teacher working condition survey, one thing that I do additionally, I've always done it as a principal, at the very end of the year, I give my own survey and I ask 2 questions. What worked this year and what didn't? That's all I say, because that can give me a lot of insight about what might be going on. And with that, teacher working condition survey, along with my survey, I do my school improvement plan in the summer. To me, it's pointless if you wait till September, October as a team to do it. Your school year's already started. Make your goals at the beginning of the year. And we look at the teacher working condition survey, and that is how we build our school improvement plan, along with our
Absolutely.
scores.
Absolutely. So if we go back, if you look under the tab for week 3 Zoom tonight, let me share my screen. I've got some things to help with the OMA, and that's what we're talking about. One of the things that I have there is this PowerPoint. Where'd my PowerPoint go? Move this out of the way and see if I can find my PowerPoint. No, of course not. But under Zoom session 3, I've got this, and to what Dr. Caton was just talking about. If you're an elementary principal, you want to know what kids shouldn't be in the room together, and you get teachers to help you with that. But now remember where in the process that comes. And so when we're looking at it, just like she was talking about, we've got to make our plans for our federal programs first, because they're the most restrictive in dollars and positions and how we can use those. Then state law from our General Assembly, local board. But then again, EVOS. We get to, even in high schools, we get together and we look at that data, but then we get these two kind of at the end. After we followed all the rules and the laws that we have to, then we invite teachers in and we look at that performance data from EVOS, and we get that teacher input from them. It has to go that way. Now, if we don't do that, again, on that master schedule, they'll kill us on, I'm a valued member of this faculty, or I'm part of the decision making. They'll kill you on that on your surveys. So you've got two jobs here. One, make a master schedule that supports your school improvement plan, but also make a master schedule that has teacher input and buy-in in. Same way with the budget. So when we look at those, again, this PowerPoint is under tonight's lesson plan. Here are the things that you had together for task 1, and here's the master scheduling rationale, and then here are your federal programs. These are things that I've already talked to you about. Exceptional children, 504 intervention team referrals. Remember, once that kid is referred, for MTSS, they have the same rights as EC kids in terms of the protections. Title I school or program, and there's a difference. And I told you I'd tell you my story this week. So if you're a Title I school, every child in the school can share in the funding, the money, the teachers, etc. Now, if you're a Title I program, which means you only have 50% free and reduced lunch, only the kids that are identified in that program can be in those teachers' classes and can share in those funds that come for Title I. So you need to know the difference whether you're a Title I school or a Title I program. That's not just a title. That means how the money can be used. And so I made a visit to a school in Eastern North Carolina. I was on 40 heading from Goldsboro. You make the turn, and not Goldsboro, but make the turn in Raleigh and head toward Wilmington. And about halfway down, you come to Newton Grove, and 42 that goes across the state over to Topsail, goes all the way across. And I mean, it's you're talking about in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I had to drive up man's driveway and through his carport and out the back side to get to the school. The point of that story is you don't pass this school going anywhere else in the world. I was 35 miles from Topsail, and I went in and I had to wait an hour to see the principal, and because they were having a Title I audit, and I had to go back 2 weeks later to see the new principal. He had to retire. He had to go home because what he had done, he had let teachers pressure him. He forgot the rationale, how it goes. He forgot that teacher input comes last and federal programs come first. And he was just a Title I program school, and he put, in order to, the third grade teachers all complained about their class size loads, and so he moved 30 kids, regular ed kids, into Title I teachers classes. You don't do that but once. And, you know, and I'm quite sure that the day he did that, the Title I teachers called Raleigh and told on him. And so they came hot footing it out there and did a Title I audit and found that he had 30 non-Title I kids in his Title I program. You don't do that but one time. So again, there's a rationale for how you build the master schedule, but it has to go in this order. We want teachers to have input, but their input can't, we can't overpower or prioritize that over federal law, state law, Board of Ed policy. That comes first. But then we have to involve them in that, and we have to make sure that they know that. What he needed to say to those teachers is I can't take these regular ed kids and put them in those Title I teachers' classes. That's against the law. That's not a negotiable. That's not a debatable. You have to make sure that teachers understand that I value your opinion, but I value my job, and I don't want to lose my house. So I can't violate federal law and misspend federal dollars. We have to come to an understanding as a faculty of how that works. I have to follow the laws of the General Assembly, the State Board of Education, as interpreted by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, the South Carolina Department of Education. I have to follow those laws. I have to follow local board policy. They give me a sheet of non-negotiables. I have one. I have a copy of one of what has to happen and when. I think I can pull that up. Now it's a picture. I will apologize for the quality of it. And so if I can pull it up, and the reason I hadn't pulled it up already is because, again, it's a picture and it's hard to deal with. And so let me see if I've got it here.
Dr. Lamb, while you're looking for that, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, so kind of going back to last semester, when we were analyzing our teacher working conditions and then we gave our own types of surveys to our teachers, I found a huge discrepancy. Like huge.
Yeah.
And our teacher working conditions looked phenomenal. It looked like we had our teacher efficacy was, out off the charts. But then in my survey, what they provided was a very different picture.
Yeah. Imagine that.
So my question is, and this is my second year at this school. And my actual first year, I went out on maternity leave in December, and I came back 1 week before COVID hit and all schools were closed. So I'm not a huge part of the faculty yet, if that makes sense. Like I'm not vetted into their culture and into their climate.
Right.
So I was very surprised that they were so open when I provided that survey to them and asked them those questions. But why do you think there was such a huge discrepancy, or why do they feel like they have to say it's better than what it actually is?
Well, I'm going to give you my opinion, and I'm going to let the two sitting principals speak to you. One of the reasons why TWC scores are skewed upward in certain places is it's known that they're being tracked for their responses. And it's okay to talk in-house, but it's not okay to talk out of house. Now, one of the things that I have to teach my doctoral students when we're doing survey work is the difference between confidentiality and anonymity. When you're doing survey work, you can't do anonymity. You have to do confidentiality. When we provide a link for teachers to go in and do TWC, it's a identifiable link. We know who's responded. That keeps one teacher from going in 25 times. We have to do that. So the TWC is not anonymous. It's actually confidential. There's a difference. And so, and it's kind of understood in certain places that we don't talk out of school or don't talk out of house, or they're afraid of repercussions. Now on the inside, that's not going to go, not going to be on a public website where it can be seen. Teachers will be a lot more honest, but in some districts, teachers are just afraid on that TWC, which is going to be posted online and going to be collected in Raleigh. They're afraid to speak and tell the truth. It's just, you don't speak out, what stays, this is our house, what happens here stays here kind of thing, like Vegas. That's been my experience. doing a whole lot of Qualtrics survey work for a long time. That's one of the things that we have to factor in, is that self-report's the least reliable form of data. But that from my experience, doing a lot of big survey work and for different folks, and especially here at the college, that's what we deal with. People are just won't speak out of turn. Doctors Maraglia and Caton, a word.
I would agree with that. I mean, I know when I have seen and heard of situations where these surveys are taken in a staff meeting and and you can't leave until there's some sort of proof you've taken the survey, and that's not going to be the ideal setting and environment for someone who feels like they feel like they certainly can't be honest. And I do know that people are concerned about retribution.
Maybe I'm a little bit more naive. I'm going to be very honest with you, because I don't do my teacher working conditions surveys like that. I've never seen. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure other principals do that. So maybe I'm just naive about that. I know that sometimes the teacher working conditions survey is very long, and so teachers just end up clicking, click, 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 click. I know that, and they say that. And I know that sometimes when I've gone over some of the questions, like with SIT, they didn't understand the question. So I know that as well. So, that's some of my opinions about it. So
I will say this: I had to deal with a situation. It's been a while. Remember, I'm old. I had to deal with a situation where a principal accosted a teacher in a open faculty meeting about their responses on the TWC. That happened. That's not. I had to deal with that. That did not go well. But the principal was sure who the teacher was, and accosted them in front of the rest of the faculty as a warning to everybody else. And of course, a complaint was filed, and I had to deal with that. And there was a sanction against that principal for doing that. But the word got out real quickly that you can do all you want in terms of inside the house, but now we don't take our dirty laundry out in public. And so that became that became the way business was done there. And that's unfortunate, but that's my take is that the survey that you did, I'll guarantee you, was a whole lot more accurate to what you see every day than what the TWC is. And that's one of the things that we're going to have you do because of that. When you get to the cap at the end of this semester and next semester, this is a great point. And thank you for this, Rachel. We're going to have you redo the TWC on the culture. When you do culture, when you do time, resources, facilities, teacher empowerment in school, and school leadership, when you do those 5, that's required of the cap, we're going to have you do the gap analysis on the ones, the items that are the lowest, and we're going to have you resurvey for that very reason, that what's on the TWC and what's in reality sometimes is very far apart. And the only way that you can address the culture of your school is if you have accurate data. That is correct. So we will have you do a needs assessment. You'll do the gap, and you'll identify your lowest items from those 5 required areas. You can do more than that. There's 12 areas. You can do more than that, but you're required to do those 5. But you'll do a needs assessment, which is the same questions in the same format, surveyed to teachers again to see what the real deal is, to see how, and see, is this what's real and true, or were you just mad at the principal that day, or were you just afraid? And so that's why they're so high, or you mad at the principal, they're so low, or you were afraid, that's why they're so high. And so we try to drill down, and what we find, Rachel, you're exactly right. We find sometimes there's a pretty big discrepancy on what TWC said and what teachers will tell you in a private survey. And that's part of it. So when we talk about, back to the OMA, when we talk about local board policy, here's one from Guilford County Schools for elementaries. This is the non-negotiable list for scheduling. It's got a little age on it. Obviously, they wouldn't give me one currently, but I do have one from 2015-16 that speaks to the things that you cannot. Let me see if I can get it to make it a little bit bigger here. Okay. All the things that you have to do, minutes of this, minutes of that, daily schedule, all of those kinds of things, they address that. How many days we're going to have, how many minutes of this. We're going to do 185. The school day is going to be this long. We're going to do a block schedule. All of those things are, all of that stuff is decided by your district. They give you that as a principal. So when we go back, so federal law, all of your programs, they all have highly restricted programs. Federal, state law about how many days. Let me go down here. Here are the things that mostly state law speaks to: size, class size limits, highly qualified teachers, teacher licensure areas, days, hours, minutes of instruction, planning time, duty-free time, and teacher work days. Those all have to be factored into your schedule. Federal law, all these programs are under federal law. Local board policy, all of these things. Daily schedule, block, flex, AB day, traditional, mosaic. Mosaic's a fancy way to say school within a school. Hours of instruction, reading, science, math, social studies, language arts, special programs that we're going to run in our district, like Words Their Way, Character Ed, Avid, Leader in Me, PBIS, etc. How you're going to run your clubs and organizations in terms of if you're going to run a club day schedule or a modified schedule. And then they also usually speak to to build in time into your schedule for local assessments. Those are the kinds of things you see. Those have got to be factored into your schedule. And then your EVOS performance data, and then teacher input. That's the rationale for scheduling. So now you said, Dale, you belabored this point. Tell me why. Well, it's real simple. When we get to OMA task 3, because you're going to breeze right through task 2. Remember, right here on task 2, you simply copy and paste APTEL task 1 to 3 in your OMA template, remove all the headings and labels. Be sure to include that graphic organizer of your professional growth plan that you did for APTEL task 3. Once you've got that, you just move on to 3. And that's why I was talking about earlier. Brad's already in 3. He's the high achiever of the group. He wrote a great task 1. He breezed right through task 2. He's into task 3. And so this is the guidance that I gave him as he moved into task 3. You'll be looking at the master scheduling process in task 3. You have to assess the process. Are they following the rationale? Not just the master schedule itself. And you're to assess the strengths and weaknesses of the process. For example, when it talks about teacher input, you don't need to get teacher input in writing task 3. You're trying to gauge how much teacher input is built into the process, and at what point does the teacher input come in. We want it to come in last. EVOS right before that, board policy, state law, federal law. We want it to come that way. Federal law first and then on down the line. Once you've assessed the process, then you look at the master schedule itself. From what you've learned in task 1 and 2, how could the current master schedule be rebuilt or modified, your choice, to better align with the scheduling rationale of federal law, state law, board policy, best practices, EVOS, and teacher input, to better serve the students and to better meet the objectives of your school improvement plan. Remember, the whole notion is the master schedule and the budget have to support, as you saw in that PowerPoint, they have to support that school improvement plan if you want to move your school in a continuous improvement loop. So that's my guidance for you on moving into task 3. That's how you do task 2. This is my guidance on how to do task 3. I've included the PowerPoint that kind of walks you through it that I just showed you. That's what I expect in task 3. It's fairly simple once you understand it. And then of course in task 4, you just write your competencies. Now you should write 12. I think there's 8 selected, and or you can pick any 12 you want from my point of view. And then you'll do the other 9 when we do the skip later this semester. So that's my guidance tonight on the OMA. I told you we would cover that this week, and I put these materials together for you. And so, so coming up by the weekend, you should have task 1 done by Sunday, and task 2 should take you 2 hours or less. And so before we meet again, you should be accelerating yourself into task 3 before we meet again. And so I went ahead and covered task 3 tonight, even though on the schedule, it's not due for 2 weeks. You can go right on into it after you do the copy and paste for task 2. And that's why I told you, we'll gain a week and we'll get to the cap before this semester is over that way. This is where we pick up a week. All right. Questions about, let me get back to this. Questions about the OMA, what the expectation is. If you got a few minutes, go to discussion board and read Tamara's task 1. It's killer. It's great. Brad's done great work as well. He linked all of his together as well. He did a great job. Those are both posted. Brad's already done his task 2. It's in discussion board. You can see it's a simple copy and paste. You know, he's the high achiever. He's already in task 3, and I'm looking for it to come in any day now. And so, you know, this is not, if you know what you're doing, once you collect all these pieces in task 1, I told you it goes really fast after that. And the skip will go fast as well. We'll make sure that we know all the tricks for how to put it together as well. All right. The other thing that I wanted to cover tonight, and I've got 20 minutes. I love it when a plan comes together. And so here are the court cases that are relevant that you need to be, to take a school law course, here are the relevant court cases that I think are relevant in the modern era. You say, well, 1954, that's not the modern era. It started the modern era of schooling. And so we need to understand the Brown case, Brown versus Board of Education in 54, said that separate was not equal. Now, we didn't really do anything for 11 years in this country. We just sat and looked at one another. Well, what does that mean? Until the Civil Rights Act of 65. And then schools were forced to start integration in 1966. I was in school then. And I remember very well when it happened. And so school consolidation happened as a result of that. Also, because of that, North Carolina exited capital funding. North Carolina state does not fund the building of schools. That was now put on the locals. And the movers and shakers that run this state are the big construction firms. And so they started building community colleges hand over fist rather than public schools. And that's why we have 58 community and technical colleges. And with satellites have well over 100 campuses in the state that needs about 20. And so but that's why, because we got out of building schools and said it was up to locals to do that, because for whatever reason they weren't interested in so local districts were forced to consolidate because they couldn't afford to keep a school on every corner. There's a lot of things that come out of that in terms of what shaped schools even today. But that's those cases. All right. And then the other thing that came out of 65, most important, were the Elementary and Secondary Act, ESA of 65, which set aside titles 1 through 9. Title 1, you know what Title 1 is, you know what Title 9 is, gender equity. And there's nine titles there. Those came out from 1965 as well. More from my era in 69, Thinker versus Des Moines. It was a case about students protesting the Vietnam War, but the bigger implications were is that students now have rights. And that speaks to us in a school law course in terms of due process. And we're going to get to that as we go through this course this semester. A big part of what we have to do, and when you interview those AP that does discipline, is we have to provide students due process. They get to tell their side of the story. They get to present witnesses. They get to know what the charges are against them. All that has to happen before you can discipline a child. Well, that didn't happen prior to 1969. Students did not have rights in schools. You could do whatever you wanted to with them. You could search them. You could do whatever. But starting in '69 with the Tinker decision, students now have rights. And it's not about protesting this or that or the other. It's about how they are dealt with in school, especially in cases of in disciplinary incidents. And so that's the watershed case for that one. Swan in '71 in Charlotte was a national case on busing for integration. It lasted for 30 years until the Capuchon lawsuit in 2001. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the Swan case was argued before the Supreme Court by Julius Chambers. And that case for busing, that was decided in 1971. The educational amendments of '72, titles 1 through 9 were reauthorized. In '74, we had the first law that spoke to exceptional children. PL 94-142 was passed in 1974 that said exceptional children could come to public school, that they had the right to come, and that they had the right to be served in the least restrictive environment. And so many of us older Americans didn't go to school with exceptional children, except maybe one or two that helped the custodian. But we didn't have EC classes. But that's not always been a thing. Only since the mid '70s has that even been a thing. The '75 Robinson case was a constitutional challenge to the Elementary and Secondary Acts of '65, and they were upheld in the Robinson case. 1984, the Basic Ed Plan came to North Carolina. The first move to school accountability in 1984 was determined that every child in North Carolina and other states had the right to a basic education. And then somebody scratched their head and said, well, what is a basic education? So the first thing they had to define is what is a basic education? And so they spent from 1984 to 1989 writing a statewide curriculum that was called the Standard Course of Study. Came in big, white, thick notebooks. And that they said, and then they patted themselves on the back in '89 and said, all right, this is what a basic education is. And then some smart guy in the back said, well, how do we know they're going to get it? So that's when we started high stakes testing. It was initially called performance-based accountability, PBAC. And it became the state ABC program. And out of that generated the state report card, integrated testing for elementary and into course testing for high school. That's where that all came from. Now, the basic ed also had some other parts in it that fell away very quickly that were much more positive, in my opinion. But they cost money, and so they went away really quickly. Part of that basic ed plan set up the career development pilot program, and I worked in two of those, by the way, a state pilot in Burke County and a local pilot in Charlotte during that time. And the whole idea was teachers made status 1, 2, and 3, and they did professional development and other things. And so the notion was that if we were going to all of a sudden do high stakes testing and hold teachers accountable, that we had to train them and work with them, and we had to develop them. But that money ran out real quick. But we kept the accountability piece, but we lost the training piece real quickly. And so as you found out when you did your APTEL last semester, the notion here is you're not going to get a bunch of staff development money, that you've got to develop your own teacher leaders that teach other teachers in your building. Well, the state, said, well, we're going to take that function from you in the mid '80s. We're going to take that function from you, and we're going to provide you money so that you can develop those teachers and give them release time for their classes. That lasted a couple of years, and the money ran out. But we kept the accountability measures on teachers. We just we softened the blow with telling them that we were going to provide training and funds and all that, which went away very quickly, unfortunately. But that's where all that came from. 94 to 98, Leandro, we're going to have a case study this semester. It was about funding. As I said, the local is now responsible for funding buildings. And the state gives you a per pupil allotment about $8,000 per pupil. They give every pupil that you have that $8,000. Now, understanding it's based on average daily membership. So when the PMR, the principal's monthly report, goes in, it's done electronically now. what we do is say attendance is 95% for your district. We subtract 5% from that $8,000 that we give you. Now, we don't give you the $8,000 up front. We give it to you in 10 installments of $800. The month after, you have to have enough money on hand as a district to start, operating budget to start the first month. And at the end of the first month, we reimburse you. That's called the modified accrual accounting system. We reimburse you that money. So you spent that money, but now we subtract what we send you from the state. We subtract your absences. So we pay you for average daily membership, not how many is on the roll, but how many that showed up. That's real important that's why it's so important to get your attendance accurately. We don't pay if the kid's out today. We don't pay for that kid having been in school. That's one of the issues now with funding with all these kids that we've lost during the pandemic that aren't showing up, aren't coming to school when school is open, that aren't online. The issue is the state going to pay for them? And so that's going to translate to teacher positions, unfortunately. But understanding the Leandro lawsuit eventually was decided against the low wealth districts. What they wanted was to get away from a flat funding formula of $8,000 per pupil and go to a district power equalizing formula, where Charlotte-Mecklenburg, wealthy district, $8,000, and they could add another $4,000 to it, so they were spending $12,000 per pupil. Low wealth districts like Hoke only had the $8,000. They didn't have any extra money to put with that per pupil, because guess what? They were having to pay for their own buildings now and keeping them up. The state got out of that, and they said, we can't afford, to pay capital and add anything, buy extra teachers or pay, add to that per pupil, which is usually more teachers. So what we want you to do is give Charlotte-Mecklenburg students $6,000. Take $2,000 from them. They'll add $4 to that, and they'll end up with $10. But you take that $8 you were going to give us, that $2,000 you took from them, and we'll get $10. So in the end, we've all got $10,000. But as we'll find out later this semester, that did not happen. We did not district power equalize. We still have a flat funding formula. But that's what Leandro was about. It spoke to how much you ended up with in the end. And it took into account low wealth and adding extra dollars. And so when we get to that case study, we'll dive into that one. But that happened over in 94 and 98. Now I will, full disclosure, I was on the legal team that lost that side. So, some of my comments may be a little harsh. It still stings that we lost that one, but that's the way it goes. Again, as I said, there had to be a lawsuit back in Charlotte-Mecklenburg where the original lawsuit came from for Swan for busing. And so a group got together and sponsored a lawsuit in 2001. And Swan was ended after 30 years. They found that the district was unitary, and the ruling not only said, that the district is unitary, that if schools resegregate, the school district nor the state was not obligated to remedy that. So schools that had been previously integrated resegregated overnight, literally overnight resegregated across not just Charlotte but across the country. So that ended in busing for integration. It lasted for 30 years and it went away in 30 minutes. Then the next big thing that came along was No Child Left Behind. You need to understand that it speaks to low performing schools academically, but also persistently dangerous, that we're going to cover later this semester. And that's a whole lot more likely to get you as a principal than low performing. Is persistently dangerous. There is no recourse. If you get declared persistently dangerous because of the number of acts of violence on your campus, and we'll cover that, they'll reconstitute your school. I've only known a couple of districts that tried to do that other alternative where kids can choose to go to another school in the district and you have to bus them there at your cost. That nobody has tried that in the last 10 or 15 years that I'm aware of. They just reconstitute the school. And that means they fire the administrative team, make teachers reapply for their job and then go on about their business. But we tried that one time in CMS. We had kids at Cochran and we busted them with Jay Robinson. That did not go well, to say the least. That 2-hour bus ride each way did not go well. And so we'll talk about that, but it also speaks to teacher retention. And that's where we got the teacher working condition survey. So when somebody asks me, why do we do teacher working condition survey? And if it's so important, why we only do it every other year? Because we're just checking a box. No Child Left Behind said every state must have a retention effort for teachers. And so our retention effort in North Carolina turned out to be the teacher working condition survey. And it's not important enough that we do it every year. We only do it every other year. But districts have added a survey on the in-between year and some additional surveying. But that's how we got teacher working condition survey, is that we had to have a program or some sort of an initiative to keep teachers on teacher retention, and that's what we do in North Carolina. That's where we also, for the first time, got into highly qualified teachers and certification. That came from No Child Left Behind as well. EVOS came along after 20 years of collecting data from 1990 to 2010. We got into the EVOS value added model. It's simply an analysis of variance that translates into a linear regression, and an algorithm comes out of that. It's pretty simple stuff. Basically what we do with that is we try to isolate the effect of a teacher, how much of the variance in a kid's test score can be attributed to the teacher, and look at schools and look at growth rather than, remember, growth is what you do with a kid. Comparative accountability is who you got. And so, but that was a watershed in North Carolina and other schools across the nature. That year, 37 states adopted some form of EVOS in 2010. That was at some point supposed to get to the actual point of schooling was, what are you doing with kids that you have? I won't say that we got there, but we got there. And then we also looked at paper performance from the lottery money, pre-K scholarships, low wealth, those kind of things out of lottery, and then charters, vouchers, and those things. We eliminated master's pay in 13-14, and we eliminated career status as well. So those are the big things. Now, I always get asked, how did we get the lottery? How did a Bible Belt state like North Carolina and South Carolina, how'd they get the lottery? Well, I can tell you how they got the lottery. It came out of the Leandro case. When the Leandro case was decided, they said, we're not going to equalize money, or we're not going to get away from flat grant and do district power equalizing and adjust the money. But what we will do, we got a deal for you. We'll start a state education lottery that will generate money to give to you for capital needs that will free up some of your local money to spend on pupils. Now, as we know, the lottery money has been, it's been a unicorn, a phantom, a snipe, Bigfoot. It just really has not materialized in any real way. It's been a few pork barrel projects, but it's not a constant stream of money that comes every year. And it can only be used for capital. Like up in Surrey County that built a cafeteria. They weren't smart enough to figure out how to run 2 lunch shifts, so all 300 kids, they wanted all 300 of their kids in their high school to be able to eat at one time. So they got a grant to build a cafeteria. Nothing wrong with the cafeteria they had. Everybody couldn't eat at one time, and they couldn't figure out how to schedule their school with 2 lunch shifts. I can't make that up. They made a commercial of that, the superintendent, and it only ran for like one day, and the backlash was so great they quit running that commercial on TV. But because most people understood that was just wasteful. And so the lottery money has turned out to be very politicized pork barrel. But again, it can't be used per pupil to hire teachers or for supplies, materials. It can only be used for capital. But the idea being, you can take money that you were going to spend on capital, and you can now hire extra teachers, except it doesn't come on a regular basis. And so if I get a little capital money this year, that would take care of my upkeep of my buildings or build something. Two things. Number one, if I build a new building, I've got the ongoing cost of keeping that building open. And number two, I take my local money and hire some extra teachers. Next year, I don't have the money to pay their salary. And so the great boon in education from the lottery has never appeared, unfortunately. But that's how we got the lottery in Bible Belt states, is we told people it's going to be an education lottery and that it's going to transform education. And of course it didn't. By the time they pay the winners and the company that administers it and the state takes theirs off the top, how much is left? I think there's only like 7% that's left. A ridiculously small amount, and it's pork barrel. And so, but that's how we got the lottery. So I have a question here. Leandro was back in court. Brad asked the question. Leandro stays in court. They're always following up on Leandro because the conditions that Leandro set down, nobody wants to do them, and so they continue to pretend that they don't, and it keeps going back to court. Now it doesn't go back to court in order to try to change what the court held or the finding, that we're not going to manipulate the money. There were certain things that Leandro said that you had to do for at-risk kids that we find districts aren't doing because they don't have the money. So Leandro gets revisited every year for the follow-up, and we'll talk about that when we get to that court case, and you'll see some of those things. I have a really good PowerPoint that one of my students did a couple of semesters ago that follows up the aftermath. But they set, freshman academies, all those kinds of things came out of Leandro that they were supposed to do for at-risk districts for at-risk kids. But what happens is when the budget gets tight, we forget to do those things. And that's why Leandro gets revisited every year. Principals, do you have anything that you want to speak to Leandro and funding and lottery money before we go?
Yeah, lottery money. You don't get lottery money. You already said that.
Yeah.
The only thing, this is kind of off topic. We do need to look at my task stream, unless hers is right, because I don't see some of my stuff in task stream, Dr. Lamb.
Okay.
I emailed you.
Yeah, please go in, and I went in and checked last night to make sure that y'all were in there. Please go in and request comments on your competency folio from your coach, and let me know if you can't see them.
Yeah, that's
you won't see anything until they request comments.
Right. I had a student to request a comment, and I don't have anything in there at all.
Okay. So when you go in,
and that's what I just emailed you about, Dr. Lamb.
Okay.
It just says there's no folios or web pages or when I go into it.
Okay, I'll go in and check that again here in a few minutes. Wendy will be off after 8, and I'll go in and double check and make sure that y'all are linked to the students. But please go in and request comments. Hopefully I'll get task stream working. There's probably a glitch in it somewhere, but I'll be in on that. I was in it last night. Everything looked good, but I'll go back in and make sure. All right. I appreciate you all being with us tonight. I see our time is up. We try to stay on time. Be working on your discussion board too. Go to 3, skip somewhere else if you want to. Just make sure you get all those. You should be finishing up task 1 by this weekend. Task 2 is copy and paste. Accelerate on into task 3, and I will see y'all all next Wednesday. Bye.
Bye.